Of what we were doing and how it was done. So it was done basically, as Michael said, it was done by the network members for the network members. There were two focus groups. Important thing was that they represented different parts, regions, countries of Europe, that they represented various types of cinemas, and most important, various local contexts and realities, because network members come from different backgrounds and they have different situations. Two focus groups worked together with Europa Cinema's team. They were facilitated by Michael, ever-present Michael. We worked via Zoom with regular meetings, schedules, minutes, and we had documents, and so it was a serious process with a serious work.
Right, so the charters that we eventually ended up with are outlining the core Europa Cinema Network principles, and they represent moral and social position of the members and of the network itself. And the objective here is to turn those words into action, not just as pretty words on a paper, but something that can really turn into actions in the individual cinemas. And we realize also that in this time of sort of post-pandemic era that we are in, this can be a quite daunting endeavor to make, and quite time-consuming, and also you know, something that needs a really long-term commitment. And there are also very much a diverse group of cinemas that we are, of course, and different countries have different opportunities to do these things. And also it could be in terms of finance, it can be in terms of infrastructure, but also everybody knows, you know, that maybe like Germany or the northern countries have a great infrastructure for recycling and for everything that comes to, you can think of, then it comes to mind when you have to do green initiatives and sustainability, and other countries might not have as much be on the same level at this moment. But the whole point is, wherever you are, you can start from somewhere and build something. We don't have to be on the same page to begin with, and we don't. The whole idea is to get started somewhere. And also, it's not created to just increase the amount of work in a cinema, or to, you know, increase responsibilities and be you don't have to be the great person in your society, but I think it's really, really important to recognize that we have audiences and we interact with people all the time. And when it comes to issues of sustainability, when it comes to issues of gender balance, our core audiences all across Europe are very, very invested in these issues. And for us to be engaging in that is actually a very, very good business development scheme, because they will demand from us that we take these things seriously, and therefore it's a very good idea for your business to do so.
So this is how the charters actually look now. So it's very condensed text on 2 pages for each charter. It will be available after the conference for you to read thoroughly through it. It's a very, as I said, it's a set of principles that lead up to concrete actions that any cinema can do in your environment.
Right. So how to turn these principles into action? We must have a sense of, that it feels achievable and relevant to your local realities, and objectives need to be clear and the methodology transparent and the results shareable. For that reasons, we're really just setting the stage here for some really good examples that come afterwards. A lot of great speakers that will share with you some of the initiatives that are already going. And that all work needs to be carried out with sort of sustainable resources and within the realistic timescale and budgets available. What this means, I think, is that you shouldn't just make a big splash of something, but rather to try to incorporate these issues into your normal budget and into your day-to-day work in order to make it sustainable and in order to make it work long time and on a long-term commitment. I forgot to say also that it's important to recognize a lot of you were in the Collaborate to Innovate session, last session here. If you're planning something to apply for the next iterations of Collaborate to Innovate, these issues will be very important and will absolutely increase your chances to get your project approved.
So the focus groups identified the ways how to actual steps that you can do to start working on these things if you are not already doing it, which you might find out when you follow these steps. So it's a 7-step approach. I'm not going to read it because it's going to take too long, but these are like a stepping stones that you can evaluate things that you might already been doing, not knowing, and to see where your weakest points might lie, what you're already doing that it's worth, doing more or elaborate on it. So 7-step approach that it's very practical.
Right. So the focus group also tried to break this down into action blocks for both charters. And for the gender balance and diversity charters, the first action block is, how can I improve content diversity? I'm not going to read through all of it. It will all be presented on the Europa Cinema Space website. But, basically, what am I screening and how is that important in terms of gender balance? The second part is, how can I improve my business diversity? And that can be something as, simple as who am I hiring? How am I dealing with recruitment in the cinema? And the third block is how can I improve my audience diversity? And of course, this is a huge issue that some of the speakers have already been addressing in this conference. But I think the baseline of this is: do I have a safe space for everyone? Is my cinema inclusive to whoever I may be who enters the cinema? Am I welcome? Do I feel like I have a safe space here, regardless of my creed or credentials?
And the same goes for the Green Initiative Charter. Those key questions were identified by network members to help them tackle these really daunting tasks. So the first one was, how can I become a more socially and environmentally sustainable business? And go through these questions that are asked. This is like a help for you. How can I build a green program? Who can I ask for help? Are there other cinemas doing it? Can you compare things like this? How can I move towards carbon neutrality? Sorry, I don't, it's a hard word. Yeah, it's to the second day. So anyway, it's all these things that you see now, you will be able to get later on to read more thoroughly. You will be able to read charters more thoroughly. But the most important message, I think it is that we were talking a lot about that cinemas are not, we are not activists. So we didn't want network members to feel that this is another thing that we will have to do. It might be like a scary thing to compare ourselves, for instance, with Germany. You will hear MATHIAS later on explain how a lot can be done, but you have to have resources, you have to have support of your country for that. But it doesn't have to go for the big things right away. You can start really small, and you will find out, I'm sure that you will find out, that there is a lot that you are already doing, because we are doing this for our audiences, and we know them, and we know that they expect that from us. So that's it.
Yes, and I might just add that this is done by members and by the association together, and this will you can look forward to not only reading and understanding the charters, but they will also be in part of future agreements with Europa Cinemas. So I hope you're on board, because you have to sign on it eventually.
With blood.
Thank you, and I think echoing the last session too, this was not about words. The words are important. Read them, go through them, and I'm sure there are things that you will wish to sign up to. But what's really clear is there is no choice in this matter. I mean, in terms of gender balance and diversity, the point that was made by members was very, very clear. There is business value in being diverse and open and letting people in. If you want to get young people into your cinema, you simply have to accept that the gender balance is not a small thing anymore. It's a giant thing. In terms of recruitment and in terms of the talent and the approach you've got, this is essential. This isn't a nice virtue signaling thing on the edge here. This is necessary for the businesses that we have today. And the same with the environmental stuff. I think when we're all now focused on this, because energy costs have suddenly become a giant part of our everyday lives. But these are about realities that you simply have to face. What this charter does, I think, is make a statement of intent, and what the plan does is allow you to organize how you can participate in a structured way into making these things happen, and how you collectively can work together to make a genuine difference on the ground that will have a business benefit and will be a critical necessity if we believe in what we say we believe in terms of the future of culture. So that's the overview. In terms of practicalities, that's what we want to come to, is to see how some of those processes are already in play, and a lot of this is going to be learning from each other. That's a huge part of this process. So, Matthias, you've got a bit of a welcome already. Matthias Damm from Casablanca Cinema, he's been a real thought leader, I think, in terms of the green and environmental work we did, and someone who has really practiced what he's preached. So, Matthias.
Ja, vielen Dank. Mir noch meine Präsentation. Ah ja, genau, sehr gut. Also, ich starte eigentlich genau da, wo wir gerade.
Thank you for showing my slides. That's where I'll start.
Am Anfang wurde schon gesagt, ganz wichtig natürlich, warum machen wir das alles hier? Die Klimakrise ist da.
The question we have to ask is, why are we doing all of that? Well, you know, there's a climate crisis that we all have to react to. It's a great opportunity for us to rethink and reorganize ourselves. We're faced with a number of legal requirements. We have to react to these new requirements. And if we need support, if we want to get support, we'll have to comply with these criteria that are imposed upon us, such as the ones coming from Europa cinemas, but also the other sources of subsidies and funding. They will ask us to meet a number of criteria. On the other hand, we're going to be able to save money as well. That's for sure. All those who've invested in energy, low energy consumption plans have managed to save on their bills. So we have to control our energy costs as well. There are very practical examples that exist, talking about production, but also practical things such as heating and lighting. And our audiences like what we do, and our initiatives, they're interested. And they choose the places where they want to go. That is, these places that have invested in the future. These places that are credible, that make them think that we're thinking ahead. Now, where do I come from? I work in Nuremberg with a small cinema called Casablanca. We've been up since 1974, so it started as a theatre, and then in 1976 a cinema that was then closed, and then we reopened since 2009. We've had a new management team. We have 1,000 members, more or less. It's a tiny cinema. 40 members are active members. We have more or less 90 seats and 3 cinemas all in all, so a very small cinema. We do what we can. Yet we've a lot of courage. This is our logo. This is the sentence we use to describe ourselves, Kino mit Courage. So we have another project, as you can see on the screen, an initiative that was developed in 2017, Kino Natürlich, and this is one of our commitments. Right, this was for the backdrop. We also worked on the CO2 emissions. I'll give you more information about this in a minute. Now, here's a tiny cinema, almost in a backyard, in a building. As you can see, it's called Courage. Now, this is the main entrance. As you can see, the crowds really like that because you have this cozy impression. It's very much viewer-friendly. Now, this is the biggest room we have, 100 seats more or less, and that's the bistro, the bar, if you will, or restaurant. So a tiny project, a tiny cinema, but the right size so that things are quite friendly for the people who come to us. And then, as was said earlier on, we'll be focusing on resources. We'll be looking at gas and electricity savings. We'll be talking about mobility. I'll tell you more about this in a minute. And then we talk to our clients. They come to us, they use their bikes, their cars. Well, that's something very important in terms of CO2 emissions. And also, we can talk about our programming and movies with our clients, and we talk about social things as well, which means that we're trying to be a good employer where our people feel good. And of course, we talk about the economic dimensions of things, such as sustainability. Sustainability is something that's based on a healthy economy and healthy management. Now, what do we have to do and what are we going to do? Now, when you read the Charter, you will see what's very important when you look at all the papers that were prepared and materials that were prepared. There's so many things that we could do, but let's be careful. Let's focus on the things that will lead to concrete results. We have to involve our teams. We have to set priorities. Our teams are working on those plans every single day. There are things that sometimes I don't like, for instance, us wasting things. That's important for us to get their feedback. We have to know what the teams want. And with that, we'll be able to improve, because our teams have expertise in their hands. If we work well with our teams, we'll have workers and employees who'll be very much involved. As I said before, we don't want greenwashing. We don't want just to talk about things that have no meaning. Our clients would realize this immediately. And we don't just want to talk about things in theory. No, we are clear when we communicate. We give numbers about our failures as well. And this is what people want. This is what the audiences want. Now let's talk about our carbon footprint. We have a method to measure our carbon footprint. And the reason is that we want to be able to benchmark ourselves, to look at how we function. Well, we have different types of emissions. We have the cold systems that produce CO2, plus also our clients that come to us that leave a CO2 print. So we have to calculate things correctly so that we can compare our numbers with others. And we follow a protocol for greenhouse gases, GHGs. I'm not going to give you all the details, but as you might know, there are different scopes. Scope 1 is direct emissions. That is when we use oil or gas for heating, for instance. So if you use gas for heating, or if you have to use electricity, then you'll leave a mark. And that's CO2 that you have to include in your calculation. And there are also indirect emissions that you have to include, that's scope 2, and then there's scope 3. These are exogenous things. For instance, if you buy products, something that's been printed, for instance, or film production, etc. So you have to draw the line. There are things that you can include in your CO2 footprint and other things that you can't. You have to find the right method, the method that works, and you have to make the best decisions. So you have to analyze your CO2 footprint, and it might be a bit complex. The final calculation will probably be correct when you've finished your work, but we've just about started. We have to find our priorities, and then from the internet you can get a number of calculation methods, and also you can get lots of practical examples, and you will see what you can do, what's possible, etc. Now, as I was saying, you have to set priorities. So how do you go about it? Well, there are things that are the easy things to do, the low-hanging fruits, and others that are not that good. The first thing is to look for big potential and easy to roll out. Those are the first things to do, the low-hanging fruits. And then you have the quick wins, the things that you can roll out very quickly. The benefit is not that big, but these things are visible, and maybe our employees and people are more happy if you do this. So the quick wins, things you can improve very quickly. And then on the right-hand side, top right-hand side, you have measures that cost a lot, but the potential of which is big. For instance, building, insulation, etc. But in this case, you need to plan things ahead of time. You need to anticipate and have time. But these are important topics as well. In a nutshell, as you can see on the screen, we know which way to follow. We're going to plan things, we're going to analyze, we're going to prioritize, we're going to go for the low-hanging fruits, the quick wins, and then we're going to plan the other measures, the ones that will be structured over the longer run. Don't waste your time with things that are expensive and for which there's no profit. And we've decided to not do a number of things. There are things you can do without. And then make sure that your teams are involved because your team members probably have lots of ideas and they'll be the ones who'll be rolling out your plan. So it's a good thing to have them in the loop from the word go. And then communicate openly with your audiences. Maybe we cannot work on the installation of our buildings or cinemas, but at least if you tell your audiences, they will understand. And then we try and think green in all the decisions that we make. What we want is change the company culture so that we green our business. And we've made progress, as I said earlier on, no greenwashing. And then let me show you how we compute things, how we compute the carbon footprint. What we use in our cinemas is gas. Well, gas leads to CO2 emissions, but then you can offset this so that you reach some type of balance. And a few words about mobility. If you look at your own staff, look at the footprint, the CO2 footprint, that's not much in terms of CO2 emissions. And then all the printouts and magazines, nowadays we use recycled paper. So that means we've reduced our CO2 emissions. And then all the things that you sell at the restaurant or the cafeteria, well, we look at local procurement. We try and buy things locally. If you buy beer locally, that's something you can do. And something that came as a surprise to us is that we tried to look at the audience mobility. When people don't get on a bus or local train, but when people use their cars. Now look at this. That's where we have most of our CO2 emissions. And I think that this is something we should work on. It's an important topic. And we have places where you can park your bicycles in front of the cinema. You can tell people that they can get on a local bus or train, and that's something important for us. Now let's continue. Okay, I've skipped a number of pages because I want to focus on something that I think is important. Look at this. Everything that's printed is printed or manufactured with recycled products like these bags. They're printed bags, but they're recycled and can be recycled again.
Okay, you can see why we love MATHIAS as part of this this process, because it's clarity of thinking that I think is critical. You make steps that you know can work and you measure that progress, because otherwise I think the point you made over and over again is if you start with the idea of green like there's a giant thing, you don't get there. It's steps, and this measurable steps is at the heart of everything you're doing. Is there any questions for MATHIAS? Okay, that's a fantastic start, and I think that same approach that you're being offered there is true in terms of gender and diversity as well. That gender balance thing. Make sure you do things that you can measure progress and have a baseline to start from. If you do nothing but start with a baseline, you've done something already. So let's move on to another perspective. So FAUCON from Utopia Sainte-Marie, France. I am.
Voilà. Alors, je souscris à tout ce qui vient d'être dit.
Well, I agree with everything that has just been said. It's very interesting and it's full of issues that we can share. Now, this is a project that has been presented in 2019. We have started to work on that project in 2017-18. Roughly speaking, I believe that our audience, the film goers, bring their own contribution, and we have a lot to learn from our audience. My idea from the start was to think about how to build a virtuous building. And I started from the opposite side. We talked a lot about innovation, but what I wondered is, what about if the genuine innovation is to stop innovating, particularly in investing in very costly and energy-consuming technologies? Because a good, meaningful film does not need high technology in order to be defended. A good film needs thinking and quality. In fact, very quickly, I realized that when you try to have an environmental building, we come across a lot of obstacles, obstacles from architects, institutions, sometimes printed media. So it's going to be more costly, 30% more costly than an ordinary cinema building. So we don't feel like we want to, and we can't afford to spend 30% more. So is it unavoidable to spend 30% more for an environmental building, cinema building? Now, we did not try to be a precursor or a pioneer, because we thought that there were some cinema buildings already in existence, and that maybe we could copy what they had done. And we realized also that we did not tick any boxes. And when we presented our project to committees, they told us, no, you can't have subsidies. For instance, if you want to have photovoltaic devices, then it's not going to be subsidized. Now, that was before COVID, and that was before there was so much awareness about climate change. Now we are we're requested to innovate, but a lot of things already exist, and I do hope that the following projects are going to be more subsidized than our project was. It was a hard work for us. It was time consuming, and I think that for other cinemas, it's going to be easier. Everything that we've done is going to be overtaken, and it has to be improved, of course. But the objective, of course, is to work for general interest for all the other cinemas. Now, what's innovative about our project or non-innovative about our project? Now, when we began to talk about dry toilets, people laughed. Now, this picture, this drawing here is very funny. It's the North-South dialogue between rich people and poor people. Now, we waste our common good in toilets. 350,000 Olympic pools in France. It's really a big waste. Now, represented by our toilets. And I think that dry toilets would be much better, and we could use the water that we would save in order to water our fields, for instance. Now, I was laughed at. Pour bien cheminer, en fait, le truc, ça a été. And in order to make progress, we tried to look for help. I did not start with meeting architects. We have a model in Utopia in our network, which is completely independent. And it was difficult to gain that independence and to gain that freedom, but it's also a nice resource because we manage not to do everything that is imposed to us. So people want to impose some models to us, and it's possible for us because we're all independent not to follow that model. We're criticized for having small houses, small cinema houses, and also have a single screen. And I replied that it was a nice model as well. And it's a model that made it possible to be very COVID resilient because we have a natural sobriety. And we could switch to very simply to an energy sobriety. If you don't have a large hall to cool or to heat up, then it's already possible to save money. And I do concur with what has been said. The first thing to do is to make an assessment. The first assessment to be made, and it's free of charge. You can do that for all the European halls, particularly in Europa Cinéma. The first assessment would be based on the sum of all our energy and water consumption and divide that by the number of annual admissions to show how much is consumed for each moviegoer. So that would make it possible to know where we start from and ask questions about how we can close the gaps. Now here, I'm showing you this picture, and I didn't have time to show you anything and to make nice slides, but I'm sorry about that. But in on this picture, you can see that small is beautiful. This is a small building, and we tried to use as few harmful products as possible. Particularly, we try to limit the use of concrete. Of course, concrete is a good product, particularly for the foundations of a building. And some limestone concrete foundations have lasted for more than 2,000 years. But we wanted to limit the use of concrete to the foundations. And we tried to use the natural slope of the building in order to make it possible for the disabled people to come in and to enter the building. And the whole structure is in wood with local carpenters. So you can see on the Utopia website, there are videos. All our walls are made of straw. Straw is a waste product. So it's a very small industry sector, but it's quite possible to use straw. And as I said, the foundations are made of a rot-proof concrete. Now, for all those technologies, I would like to invite you to visit the building. And I do agree about what you said about greenwashing, because when you see that organic tomatoes are packed in plastic, I think that it's some kind of greenwashing. And we could talk about level washing. I could label my product with a low carbon label, but it's going to cost 23,000 euros, which could be much better used for other purposes, just to be able to label my building in the right way. I think this label business is not quite what we want to do. what's important is to decrease the operating costs with solar panels, with wood heating, and then we are going to have a better impact. So environmental respect is quite profitable.
Okay, again, a really honest assessment, but just the measuring, you're quite right. When you're looking at how you can measure each part of the process, when you've got something new like this, it's kind of it's perhaps easier in the sense that everything is being invented for that very reason, but that feels like something anyone could do in an older cinema or anywhere. It's look at the areas where there could be an impact and then make sure that they are measured and your response is understood. So I thought that was a really valuable point. Does anyone have any questions for Anne? Yes, the front man.
Good morning. My name is Christos Ringas from Athens, Greece, and I actually did the very first Europa Cinema's Next Change project for Utopia Cinema in Bordeaux, together with your colleague, Mr. Stefan Bonato. So, if I recall correctly, there are 6 different cinemas for Utopia in different French cities. And I was wondering, since most of the projects that you were doing were collaborative, like, for example, previewing of the films in order to do the programming, so this was a common effort, why didn't you choose to collaborate, to innovate this project together with your fellow cinemas?
Alors, tout simplement, c'est par manque de temps, en fin de compte.
Well, we don't have the time. It takes a lot of time to launch a project like this one. All the Utopia cinemas are cooperative cinema, collaborative cinemas. But I'm, so to speak, the only one to support this project and to talk about the builders, etc. But now, of course, we've had a lot of echo in the media. But in fact, it's thanks to COVID and thanks to the awareness concerning climate change that we are considered now to be on the right track. I have followed Europa workshops, but it's a question of time. I just didn't have the time. We had organized really great workshops, but I didn't manage to attend all of them.
Which is collaboration and working with each other is really important, but you can work at different speeds. And I think that's what you're doing. You have leaders and you have people who are inspired by and maybe moving in the direction you're doing. I also thought your point was very good there, that there is positive publicity that can come out of it. So positive, you have a soundtrack downstairs. Every time you say something good, that pumping music comes through. If you feel like dancing, please express yourself that way. But no, it's really, it's good, Anne. I think you made the point really clearly. So if a round of applause for Anne, if we may, while we can hear us.
Et puis, c'est concret, en fait. C'est concret.
And it's concrete. It's very concrete. You have to come. It's an hour and a half from Paris. Please come, propose, make other suggestions, exchange our views, and beginning with dry toilets, because it does not cost anything. And you don't have any more toilets to unplug.
On the dry toilet route to your place. So thank you again. That's fantastic. Okay, so again, we're talking a lot of here because we're talking about practical initiatives on the green side. A lot of issues with sustainability we looked at in terms of gender balance and diversity too. And again, it is worth reminding everyone that a big part of what's driven a lot of the diversity and gender debate in cinema was actually research that showed, even though there were a balance of women working in the film industry, the women who were actually directing films was really, really small. And I think that drove a debate, and maybe you could see that again. If you measure, you understand, you've got a way of looking at progress. So there we go. Next up, we have Olivier DOUET. Oh, already there. Impressive. Oh, you can introduce yourself, Olivier.
Okay. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Alors, je voudrais déjà remercier Europa Cinéma pour son invitation.
Well,
En
first
fait,
of all, hello, and thank you to Europa Cinema for its invitation. I've been working for 30 years in the projection box. I worked for the greatest manufacturers concerning projection equipment. So I have a good experience, a lot of experience concerning projectors. And we have made a simple assessment of the present situation. So we have several issues, COVID, fewer similar cinema goers, and increase of the energy costs, electricity costs, which has in France been multiplied by 4 on average. So this is the basic assessment. Major difficulty today is how to save money, but all and while remaining competitive in order to attract new audience. Now, this is how we created this handbook for people working in the projection cabin. I worked 30 years ago in companies where there were only 30 millimeter projectors, and the obsolescence at the time was much less rapid than today. We changed the different parts, but you don't have to change the whole projector at the time. So we try to do the same thing for projectors today with the new technology that has existed for the past 5 years or so. We wanted to change the present projectors, xenon, into laser projectors. This is the first step of our approach. The second step is to repair everything we can repair, projectors, servers. As soon as we have the technological possibility, we try to repair. We sell and install new projectors, but they are reconditioned, recycled, if you want. This is new. We buy back from large distributors projectors that we sell to smaller distributors. We sell them to smaller exhibitors, and we buy them from large exhibitors. We also do what we call decontamination. You have in some cinemas large drawers full of xenon lamps. We try to decontaminate those xenon lamps. We recover them, and when we have an old projector which cannot be repaired, we dismantle it. We get all the parts out of it and the liquids out of it, the xenon, etc., and we try to sell those parts.
Premier geste écologique, c'est de conserver ce que l'on a déjà. On ne va pas pouvoir tous les 10 ans changer toutes les salles de cinéma, enfin, tous les équipements des salles de cinéma. C'est pas possible. Il faut quand même qu'on se mette dans une autre démarche pour pouvoir faire durer plus longtemps les matériels. C'est ce qu'on fait, et il faut changer de paradigme. Donc, le rétrofit laser. L'avantage du rétrofit laser, c'est comme pour un projecteur neuf, vous allez avoir une diminution de 65 à 70% de la consommation électrique de votre équipement de cabine. Donc ça, c'est énorme aujourd'hui. Bien évidemment, plus la salle est grande, plus la lampe xénon est grosse, et plus ça vous coûte de l'argent. Du fait qu'il n'y ait plus de lampes, il n'y a plus de déchets. Donc vous allez être beaucoup plus vertueux dans votre gestion quotidienne du cinéma, tout en conservant votre projecteur actuel. Donc, effectivement, on achète des projecteurs, on les reconditionne, et on essaye de faire au mieux toute la réparation des cartes et d'accompagner au maximum. La première démarche que l'on fait tout le temps, c'est d'essayer de proposer un matériel reconditionné plutôt qu'un matériel neuf à l'exploitant. Alors, la grande question qu'on me pose souvent, on me dit « Oui, mais nos projecteurs, aujourd'hui, on est passé il y a 10 ans à la projection numérique, nos projecteurs ont 10 ans, il faut les changer. C'est ce que disent beaucoup d'industriels. On va vous dire non, il faut absolument tout changer parce que tout est foutu. Nous, on dit non, c'est pas vrai. C'est un projecteur, le DMD qui est dans votre projecteur, on s'est aperçu, enfin c'est pas nous, c'est Texas Instruments qui ont fait des essais assez poussés sur la technologie, que la durée de vie moyenne, la norme aujourd'hui pour un DMD d'un projecteur de cinéma, c'est 10 ans, c'est 100 000 heures, pardon. 100 000 heures, un cinéma tourne à peu près 3 500, 4 000 heures par an. Donc on peut s'accorder à dire que les projecteurs actuellement installés dans les salles de cinéma, ils ont entre 35 et 40 000 heures. Donc on a encore de la marge par rapport aux 100 000 heures qui sont données par les constructeurs. En plus, ce qui se passe aujourd'hui, c'est que nous, on a avec des partenaires, il y a un constructeur européen que je nommerai pas, mais qui joue vraiment le jeu. On a des programmes de nettoyage, de reconditionnement de têtes de projecteurs. Donc, on peut réparer, tout est réparable. Le DMD se change, on peut ne changer que le DMD. On a des systèmes de box qui partent entre notre atelier et l'usine et qui on fait repartir des têtes, on répare tout. Donc, tout le temps, on ne peut pas tout le temps appliquer le rétrofit sur un projecteur parce qu'il y a des projecteurs qui sont trop vieux ou qui ont eu des problèmes de corrosion ou il y a eu trop de poussière. Alors, la poussière, ça se règle, on peut nettoyer. Et il y a des cas où le projecteur on ne peut pas le reconditionner. Alors, la bonne nouvelle, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, nous, on a commencé avec Barco, mais on est capable de rétrofiter tous les projecteurs de série 2, que ce soit Barco, Christie, NEC, et ces trois gammes-là de projecteurs, ça fait partie de 90% des équipements de salle aujourd'hui. Donc, on a commencé il y a 1 an à faire cette démarche de transformer les projecteurs, mais le partenaire que l'on a, le fabricant, ça fait déjà 7-8 ans qu'il travaille là-dessus. Et pour information, il y a aujourd'hui dans le monde entier 33 000 projecteurs qui ont été rétrofités. Comparativement à 170-175 000 salles de cinéma dans le monde, on a déjà un très fort taux, essentiellement en Asie. Donc, nous, on se dit, bon, pourquoi on ne le ferait pas ici en Europe? Parce qu'il y a plein d'avantages, ça. L'autre avantage, c'est que comparativement à une lampe xénon, c'est-à-dire la lumière, elle est très concentrée au milieu de votre écran, on perd toute l'énergie à essayer de faire un étal, donc à défocaliser la lumière. Le laser vous permet d'avoir une image beaucoup plus jolie, beaucoup plus étale. On a plus de contraste sur le projecteur et on a un espace colorimétrique qui est beaucoup plus étendu que ce qu'il était au niveau du xénon. Donc, on n'a que des points positifs, c'est-à-dire qu'on conserve l'équipement actuel, mais on a un projecteur avec toutes les caractéristiques modernes des nouvelles salles de cinéma et des nouveaux projecteurs. Et même ce que l'on fait aujourd'hui, c'est qu'on travaille aussi avec des industriels. On s'est rapproché, en France, on a des technologies nucléaires, malheureusement, mais on a une société...
We work with nuclear technology and we work with a company which manufactures a lot of technologies of that kind. And they work also for TGZs, high-speed trains. So we got in touch with them and I said, this technology is very simple to manufacture for us. So we are working closely with those companies in order to be able to remanufacture the cards. So even when the manufacturer has stopped manufacturing those cards, we can do that ourselves. I'm lucky because I've been working with the technicians for a long, long time, and they're very high skilled. They can dismantle a projector even with a DMD. So we are going to have a lot of parts. Many cinema houses are renewing their projectors, so spare parts are going to come to us. We're going to buy those spare parts, and we have become a sort of back market of the cinema projectors with all of those spare parts. Well, what is happening? There are several types of projectors, several generations of projectors. On top right, you have a barcode projectors. It lasts for about 4 hours. You can do that in the projection booth. We arrive in the morning. At 2 p.m., we make all the necessary adjustments, and at 6 p.m., everything is going to start as usual, like every day. On top left, a little bit more work. We remove everything, the mirror, DMDs, everything is removed. And below, on the right-hand side, you can see the laser. So we remove a lot of things in the projectors. What about the savings? Very important. I have taken a very telling example with a 6,000 watt lamp. 4 or 5 of them are bought by the cinema house per year, and the xenon lamp cost 5,000 euros. Electricity is 35 centimes, and we have an entry for the projector's energy, cooling, extractors, air conditioning. So this amount is 10,000 euros per year. I am going to show you a video, 1 minute only, to show you live what it's all about. And I'm going to make comment.
This is the cinema theater or room. Well, we measure things before, so there's the before and after. So we use the colorimetry from the projector. You remove the 35 milli lamp. You use the laser kit, change the rectifiers and the supply as well. Well, these were the first systems, and then you have a cooling system. Everything is in the projector nowadays. So this will take more or less 4 hours. And then there's the DMD, that is the engine more or less for this projector. And then the chips, the server, and the rest. But apart from that, the casing, the lenses, everything is kept. We keep everything. It's a lot better. It's more virtuous, as we say. And then today, we can therefore have an extension of life cycle by 5 or 6 years. Barco and others have extended their warranties. For projectors that have reached 10 years, we can now extend the life cycle to 14 years. So this is the sustainable technology. Thank you very much. I'm here if you have any questions later on.
Does anyone have any questions they want to ask? There is a question. We've got one here and then one here, if that's okay.
I'm Peggy Vol from Cinéma Vendôme in Brussels. I'd like to know if you do this abroad as well, rather quickly. What's the question? Do you do this elsewhere, in Belgium? Oh, yeah, in Belgium, yeah, we could do this. The French-speaking countries, that's what we focus on for the time being. We don't want to cover all countries, but we do this in French-speaking Switzerland, France, so Belgium, that's okay. We're discussing with an exhibitor in Belgium for the time being. Okay, thank you very much. I'll get your particulars.
I think that's a great example how you prevent hardware obsolescence. My question is this all DCI compliant? Because this is always an issue when you open up a cinema projector.
Alors, le DCI, en fait...
Well, the DCI, well, let me tell you that for all the Barco projector, after retrofitting the projector, we still have projectors that are DCI compliant, no problem. But we can't do this with other machines. We can't do this with Christie and NEC because it's the manufacturers that do this. And since they're more or less against our rationale, to put it mildly, we can't do this. We can't use the DCI on these machines. But this DCI is not for KDNs in your server. This is a 10-year-old concept. When we had the old EPFs, and it doesn't factor into, it doesn't take into account the serial number. You can, well, you know, the DCI is not really the problem today. We have many rooms, or 20 theaters, or 25 even. We never had problems with KDMs or DCIs. Never. You know, the DCI standardization is only to fight against those who want to produce other products. Well, I was going to say something along these lines. When I discussed this with my colleagues, they'd received a paper from Christie's saying that's absolutely impossible. And I thought about this and I thought maybe these are fully owned systems and they don't want us to look at other solutions, I think. Yeah, well, you see, why couldn't we do this in the film industry? You can buy a second-hand car, can't you? You don't necessarily have to buy a new car. So we have to be militants as well. We have to fight for that. Many of my clients have seen these types of, have heard these types of comments, but they decided to continue. We retrofit lots of products, and for the next 6 months, we're going to open a brand new cinema with 2 or 3 rooms, and the full cinema will be retrofitted, even the speakers. So we guarantee what we do in our work, our installations. No problem. The cinema will be up and running. We have the films, we have the KDMs, and these lasers, you know, we've had them and in operations for 5 years. It really shows that they're trying to slow us down.
I think what we is a very good example of, you know, clearly the technical side of things is going to be a big part of the greening and environmental side, but there are issues and there are interests. I think that's going to become a big thing. Sorry, Nico, you did want to say something.
Olivier, j'ai encore une question.
Yeah, I have another question, Olivier. And I read somewhere that maybe there's a problem with the screens. It depends on the screen that you have in the room. Maybe this could be a problem. Could you tell us more about this, please? Yeah, not at all with the retrofit kits. The problem is well, as far as screens are concerned, is the speckles on the screens. That's visible only on the RGB projectors. And we have another diode. We have four diodes, RGB plus, and we will no longer have the speckles. No speckles at all. And today there are groups or industrial groups that have much more speckles than we have on the 10-year-old projector.
Thank you, Olivier. That's another point made, but a round of applause. I think it's these technical issues are important to. Okay, no speckles on Madeleine. You're yes, you've got the clicker. You're going to retrofit that clicker. There you go. Okay, we've got 2 more speakers then. And we'll start with, I don't think she needs a lot of introduction, Madeleine Prost, Maddie of the Watershed, but also Madeleine Prost of Europa Cinemas. So please.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everybody. So, oh, that's good. I'm Maddie from Watershed in Bristol, and I'm going to talk a little bit about slow work. So like you all, our main focus is putting on events, doing lots of activity, and we've been very concerned about getting audiences back in. But one of the positives of slowing down with the COVID closure, the enforced closure, was that we took our foot off the pedal and we had a bit more time to think about some of the big issues that were playing out on our doorstep. You can see here a picture of slave trader, the statue of slave trader Colston being thrown into the docks outside our cinema. So, you know, there was the Black Lives Matter movement, there were the environmental crisis came into sharp focus, and there was also strong disability lobby groups that were making the case for us to sort of think about these things. 40 years ago, a warehouse at the heart of a then pretty much derelict harbour side was converted into watersheds. And post-COVID, it feels a little bit like we've gone back full circle. Once again, the center is quiet, and we have a role to kind of bring back people into the center. And we're trying to think of creative ways of doing that. So pre-COVID, we were thinking about opening a fourth screen. We had to put that on hold. And instead we opened a little cafe outside so we could keep bringing in some income and also increase the visibility of our building. But also it's about our role in the city. There's all this drama being played out in the city center. So we invited this amazing artist, Lucy Turner, to create an art piece that would kind of bring Bristol back together, which was her concept. As I said, in 2018, our plans were all about expansion. Here you can see a visualization of a great big tower, which was going to fit our ever expanding community of creatives and technologists. So we were thinking about expansion. We were going to build a fourth screen. And all of that was put on hold because of COVID. But also we were, in parallel, we were really starting to think about the environmental impact of all these plans. And I think echoing some of what the other speakers said, the idea of the greenest building in a way is the one that you're in really captured our imagination. And we started to think, well, what can we do within our existing footprint? And we signed up to Culture Declares a Climate Emergency with other organizations and our city council to become carbon neutral by 2030. But how the hell are we going to do that? That's the scary thing. You sign up to these things and then, you know, so just also echoing the idea of the charter, we were sort of looking for a framework to work in. And we were quite inspired by some of the work of donut economist Kate Raworth. Really recommend reading her book, which talks about donut economy. So what we need is economies that make us thrive, whether or not they grow. And I think in the past, our projections, our business model was always based on this idea of constant growth. And we're really sort of starting to rethink this. But how can you hit that sweet spot in terms of economics? Because everything was based on growth. It was always about income generation, growing. So we were really glad to be joined by Zoe Rashbash, who comes from a kind of activist background, has a lot of energy, and joined us as an environmental emergencies action researcher. And her work, she was brought in to really develop a framework for creative organizations in the Southwest, including Watershed, to develop a strategy to become carbon neutral. You can see here on the screen some of the framework and some of the roadblocks that she hit. We were all feeling a bit overwhelmed by, you know, how do we tackle this? Where do we start? And I mean, the good thing about Zoe is she's very practical, and she started off by kind of looking at the obstacles. She started off by putting together very simple guides, which we shared with all the cinemas in our region, which you can find on our website. You're very welcome to use it. And it gives you some easy tips on perhaps how to create a roadmap. So the idea of prioritizing, I'm just echoing a lot of the things that have been said earlier on. But really prioritize, map your impacts, and start with training. So yeah, we started with the grounding work, which you can see there at the bottom. Don't underestimate how important it is that your team is really feeling part of this. And also the need for education about what we mean by sustainability. What does it mean to different roles within the organization? So we did training for everybody, from our kitchen porters to our CEO. And it was really interesting to really find out about how they can bring different perspectives, different ideas to the picture, but also acknowledging that some people are decision makers, some people have budgets, some people are commissioning, others are perhaps receiving instructions, so understanding the kind of power structures within sustainability. And we looked at, similar to the matrix that Matthias presented earlier on, we looked at big ticket items, so things that are kind of easy wins and are going to make a big difference. So the key things we've implemented are really clear travel guidance, which also comes with a budget, so that we can make decisions about travel. And we have a kind of matrix which helps us make those decisions. Is it worth us traveling? We do a lot of international work, not just in Europe, but all over the world. We also worked with an organization called Earthly to create a baseline of our current emissions and help us prioritize retrofitting. And we also felt it was very important to communicate our work with our customers, but also with funders. Unlike Germany, there isn't a huge amount of funding for capital development, which is what you need to take big actions on your building. So we need to really make the case for our work. So everything is on our website. You're very welcome to use all the resources. All our training resources are on there, and feel free to use them. And I'm sure Zoe would be happy to talk to some of you as well about the training. Because part of us doing our action plan and carbon literacy status is about training other people. So making sure everything we do is open source and shared. I've mentioned Corsten. Black Lives Matter was a really big thing in our city. We're a very diverse city, and at the time of the Black Lives Matter movement in Bristol, we made a statement like many other organizations, and we took some pledges, which were primarily around the need for our organization to become much more representative of our community. That might sound like an easy thing to do. It's quite complex. There's all sorts of barriers that we have to kind of commit to addressing. So what have we done to do this? I think one of the things is we recognize that recruitment and our organizational culture were a very big, I guess, both an obstacle, but a potential opportunity for our organization. If we could change this, we could start changing the makeup of our organization. There was also a lot of work to be done within the organization in terms of making sure we're all on the same page in terms of what do we mean by anti-racism, what do we mean by organizational culture, understanding the history of different communities' rights and the kind of struggle that has gone along the way, understanding the law as well. So during lockdown, we all did this training with an outside organization, which was really useful. We also looked at data, which I know some of you will probably be horrified by looking at this, because I know there are different laws in different parts of Europe about how much data you can capture. The UK is data obsessed. So we want data about everything. And it's actually encouraged by a lot of diversity advocates are really, really pushing for organizations to be, to actually, share data and really share the progress that they're making on things. So yeah, all our staff were invited to take part in a survey so we could start understanding who is at the table, who's making decisions in our organizations, what does representation look like at different levels. And this is so that we can intentionally and directly create paths to readdress inequalities within our organization. It's a really complex piece of work which looks at demographics, but also feelings of belonging in the organization. And, but a couple of the highlights I would share is there was a lot of positive feelings about the organization, of employees feeling they could be themselves at work on the whole, and they could share their backgrounds And since we did the first survey, the second one, there's been a small increase in balance in 6 out of the areas that were previously underrepresented in the organization. The practical thing I would like to share with this is the recruitment strategy, because I think that's something that you could easily think about implementing in your organization. So we looked at how we recruit, where, and we did a lot of consultation with people about what might be the obstacles. So things like having really complex forms, not advertising posts for long enough, not advertising the posts in the right places. The way we interview people now is much more through chats. We do really quick chats, and then we invite people back for a second conversation. And that's made a real difference to the makeup of our teams. We've put a lot more attention as well in the experience that people have when they come and get interviewed with us. Because we believe that in the end, if they have a good experience, they will be an advocate for the cinema and they might come back and apply for a different job. So that's been really positive.
We can conclude, Maggie.
Yeah, okay. I'll end on the toilets. I'm afraid they're not dry. But yeah, the toilets have been a very, very big topic for us. It's really important that we are accessible to all communities. And when we restarted, we introduced gender neutral toilets. We did that initially with our original toilets, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone. Because obviously there were a lot of issues with the actual design of those toilets. They were gendered toilets in the first place. So some applauded and some really didn't. And that helped us create a campaign to raise funding to create toilets for everyone. And that was all about becoming a much more inclusive space. You can see that we've finally built them. If you're interested in finding out more about what's worked with it, I think come and have a chat with me. There's also a zine that was created. You can see some of the illustration about how people use our toilets at Watershed and how big a part of our offer it is. It's, we're an open building. A lot of people use our toilets, not just cinema goers. So it's a very important thing that's at the heart of our venue. And just to conclude, structural strategies like the ones I've described take a lot of time and investment. It can feel very slow, but these are really, really key to all our audience development work, making sure that different types of people, including the staff, feel welcome and feel like they belong somewhere like Watershed. And going back to Michael's point about business, it is actually a business decision as well. If we don't reflect our community, how can we possibly think that we can develop the audiences? If we don't have people that are from different communities, how can we design marketing strategies that are going to reach them and engage them? And just to say, the work doesn't stop there. You can do all these initiatives and launch them, but you have to do constant onboarding. As new people join your team, we have to remember they didn't do the anti-racism training. They didn't do the green training. So we have to see this as a long-term thing. But having a roadmap really helps celebrate points of success and see how you're doing with it all. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Maddie. I think we've got something there about the organizational, the psychology of an organization and a methodology for doing it, but we also need a methodology for lunch. So I'm going to bring the last one if I can, if that's okay. Jérémie, we've been meeting together on Zoom for a long time. I had no idea you had arms and legs. And Maddie, only 82.7% of Britons are obsessed by statistics.
Merci. Bonjour à tous et toutes. Donc, je suis Jérémie.
Hello, one and all. I'm Jérémie MONMARCHÉ. I work at the Cinéma studio in the town of Tours on the Loire Valley. Cinéma studio is an association-based cinema, and we're in the art house arena. Tours is a mid-sized town in France, 250 kilometers south of Paris, a normal city, lots of universities and tourists, and quite quiet as well. The studios are in the city center, really close to the cathedral, downtown. And we've seen that we have a diversified programming. We have films coming from all countries, all languages, but our audience is not really diversified. They're quite old. They love going to the cinema. They are well off, financially speaking. They're informed, culturally speaking. And what we're missing is to target more audiences. We're missing a big chunk of our population, that is, those who are underprivileged, those who are in derelict areas or further away from the city center. And these are the ones we're targeting. The social diversity is what we're interested in. So we started working locally. We thought we're going to go to these neighborhoods and we're going to meet the professionals out there in the social centers, to show them a number of movies and to talk about our movies, to tell them that maybe their local population could be interested. And it was worth it. It was worth coming to us, to our cinemas, to discover these films, and that is good and enriching for them and for us. It's something beneficial to all. Right. This is a bit, as I said, of a local project. We revisited our project so that it would gain the national dimension, thanks to the Collaborate to Innovate system, and thanks to our Idea Lab. The name of our project is called Passerelle. In English, Bridgeways, Passerelle. The objective is to show art house cinema films on an internet site this time, called Passerelle. There's 2 or 3 such films, art house recent films, and we've decided to focus on a number of themes and also workshops that go with these films, anything that can talk about the films so that we reach out to other audiences, the ones that associations are dealing with, so that they can talk to the local populations, so that this triggers more audiences, so that the audiences come to us, so that we create new habits and new pathways and discoveries. Now that's the site. This is what it looks like. It's work in progress. It'll be finalized soon. This is what it looks like. Here's one of the pages. We'll flip through the pages quickly. As you can see, we decided to zoom in on 2 or 3 films per month. And well, we have to try and answer a number of questions we'd not thought of at the beginning. That is, these populations are not necessarily used to listening and watching original films. They don't necessarily speak the language, so we decide to screen French films or films in French. They're more accessible to them. Or we screen films that are perhaps more positive, and films in which there's a light at the end of the tunnel. The social center facilitators say, yeah, our populations don't mind going to the cinema, but when the film is over, they don't want to be fully depressed. So that's why we try and choose films that are quote unquote accessible for these populations. And also, these populations are Arab-speaking groups usually in the more popular districts, so we can use the Arab language for people to discover new films from the Maghreb countries. So these are the avenues we're considering. And well, this is it. This is what the internet site is going to look like. And the social workers and centers will be able to use these resume or these summaries of films. As you can see, there are also additional workshops organized, plus more substantial descriptions, etc. And they will see if the film is at the local cinema, and they will be able to look at the theaters close to where they live. So that's what we want to do, facilitate the experience for these populations.
This project has been followed by the second project, which also has been supported by Orba Cinema. And this project is called Transmit Cinema. We realized that before coming in touch with the people living in the neighborhood, we had to get in touch with the social workers in this neighborhood. They're not necessarily very knowledgeable about cinema. They know about blockbusters, Marvel films, but they don't really know about films, independent films. But when we talked to them about that project, they were very interested. So we proposed a training program to educate socio-cultural professionals. You explained how you use the cinema, what you look for when you go to the cinema, what you like, what you don't like. So we worked with a professional trainer using educational techniques for people who don't know anything about cinemas, and to have them realize that the cinema can be a source, an important source of cultural discovery, and can be very helpful for the populations living in those neighborhoods. And we realize that there are lots of links that may be created between the social worker centers and the populations in those neighborhoods. In the cinema houses, or we can set up many links, whereas before, because people did not know about each other, there was no communication between the center, social center, and the cinema. What kind of results did we achieve? We created a great deal of trust with these social worker centers, and even though they have a lot of work to do, it's complicated, they have lots of requests, but however, we managed to convince them that the cinema theaters could be one of the places they could go to with the population, the inhabitants of the neighborhood. Obviously, we scored some successes, but we had some failures. First of all, this is very time-consuming. It's very time-consuming to meet those people and to get in touch with them through the website. So we have to take that into account. It's going to take some time before you get some results. Another problem, it's always very time-consuming to manufacture or to create a website, and the final result is not necessarily what you wanted to start with. So you have to take that into account. And also, we need to be able to organize training with the social workers. We have to take their work, the daily work, into account. And in the beginning, it was a little bit difficult to find our place and to organize a schedule. But what we realized is that there is a lot of interest in social worker centers, cinemas, and distributors. Distributors are interested by our approach, by our project. And when a film seems appealing to us, then we go to them, and they have understood how interesting our approach is and the fact that it attracts a new kind of audience. And of course, we have created a new relationship with them. We have had nice surprises with the young people living in this neighborhood. They didn't know about our cinema theater. They didn't know about cinema at all. They discover films that they didn't know about. They discover that they can talk about the films that have viewed, and that they can be listened to. So there is a discovery of our own audience, which is very encouraging. We also have set up a system of pending ticket, because we have to take into account the financial issues. So we asked our moviegoers to drop a coin in a small box, we change them into tickets, and those tickets can be distributed to social centers. And this has been very much appreciated by our audience, and it's is starting to be used by new viewers, and they discover our films. So we are very happy with this new initiative, and we hope that it will spread to other cinema theaters. And we would like to work with partnerships. We, of course, we've worked in the framework of Collaborate to Innovate, and we've worked a lot with other cinema theaters in France, in Gennevilliers, Caen, Perpignan, Montreuil, and also for the second project in Lyon. So this is quite interesting for us. In order to have some feedback and improve some of the issues that we had not scheduled before.
Were there any questions?
I know this is the one question.
You raised a really, really important point, and I just think it needs to be emphasized. The socio-economic divide seems to be massively underestimated to me. I say as a working class boy who's, you know, this idea that somehow we don't have a social mission, I think you deal with that really well. And I think that's the part of diversity that needs to be thoroughly addressed. So fantastic project. The second thing, just from that summary and the whole thing all the way along, the 1 minute thing is, Matthias put it really brilliant at the beginning. When you look at grand commitments in words and you look at processes that we want you to go through, start simple, the low-hanging fruit, and the lowest hanging fruit is, what do I stop doing? And I think that's come through all of the presentations. The things you say, no more. That's not acceptable, and we don't do that. Then there is the finding out and benchmarking, which is really clear in every single one of these projects. What are the realities of what we want to achieve and what we're doing? Then it's about this training, there's about the psychology of the organizations that you're working in, and then it's about manageable steps, step by step by step. And the accumulation of all those steps across this fantastic network is what is going to get us to the position that we need to be in. And I think that what you've heard today, I think, is both the plan and really huge clues to how that can happen. So thanks to you, and thanks to everyone, and enjoy your lunch.